Let's jump ahead to the third team in that top three mix. Maybe the first team in that top one mix, depending on how you look at it. Kansas City Current, going into the weekend, looked like a tough one. Going to Portland,
Sure.
Sophie Smith was going to be back. Road match, that KC defense looked a little gettable. I think I was preparing myself for a real knockdown drag out. Not what we saw.
It was not. Now, no Sam Coffey in the starting lineup is a contributor to that. I would also say no Olivia Moultrie, not helping. But like you said, they had Soph Smith back, and they're just a good team.
Mm-hmm.
So and they're playing at home. So I expected this one to be a lot closer than it was. But 3 goals in the course of 10 minutes near the end of the first half pretty much put this one to bed, and was just a great indicator that this is another team that they can kind of get their goals from anywhere on the field, but more so than anyone in the league, as we have previously discussed, from anyone on the roster.
It's borderline comical right now. They got their 17th different goal scorer with Balasagar scoring in the 38th minute. What I got a kick out of, though, 2 minutes, 12 seconds later, Jill Loyden is still pretty much describing the Balasagar goal
Right.
when this happens. Lola Bonta runs onto one and just absolutely steals Portland's soul.
Oof.
It was a great call from play-by-play announcer Joe Malfa. But after his announcement of the goal, 12 full seconds of silence from the commentators after the Labonta goal. Like, Loyden comes back with a really great "Are you kidding me?" which I loved. But yeah, they just must have been as shocked, mouth agape, as pretty much everybody watching in that moment.
I believe Lo LaBonta hit that ball roughly 1 million miles per hour into the back of the net. She
I believe that.
smoked that thing, like, to the point where I physically did clutch my chest, or as if I was wearing pearls, and just went, huh! She drilled that.
I covered my son's eyes, my 2-year-old son. I'm like, look away.
Yeah, that was talking about ruthless. That was about as ruthless as, and she had the run up to charge at it and just all the way
Blasted
through the ball.
No, and perfect placement, just video game stuff. This KC Current side, they're basically the Carolina Graham Hansen of NWSL stats. they're first in goals, first in XG, goal differential, shots on target, shot creating actions, goal creating actions, successful take-ons, and blocks. You talked about Thelma Chewinga, sort of upper crust in that blocks category, but as a team, they lead the league in that category as well. So they're just flat out dominating. Even with Orlando's 6-0 goal spree, they're still 1 goal short with regard to goal differential. So that kind of tells you all you need to know about the Current. And then last stat there, 37 goals for them in the season. Second place, the Spirits at 29.
Amazing. We've talked about the 3 major squads. I apologize while I look at my second screen here. It got me thinking about this title race, buddy. This is a proper title race. I don't think we should get past these 5 teams. So the 5 teams at the top of the table right now: Kansas City Current, Orlando Pride, Washington Spirit, Gotham FC, Portland Thorns. They're separated by 9 points. Kansas City Current sitting on 32, tied with your Orlando Pride, but 1 better on goal differential, as you mentioned. Portland Thorns are on 23 points. A lot of time left to go. But what I want to bring up here is that I mentioned the NWSL and Liga MX tournament that's going to start, I think, roughly around like July 20th. We have 2 league matches before we get into that tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Friday, June 28th, Kansas City Current plays at home versus Houston Dash. Your Orlando Pride play in Los Angeles against Angel City FC. Gotham FC plays at home against the Seattle Reign on the 30th. The Thorns play in Utah against the Royals. And the Spirits' next match is at home against North Carolina Courage. But what's that second match? Why did I wait? And why did I not say what that second match before the break is? Because on Saturday, July 6th, in Kansas City, we have the Current versus your Pride. That, my good man, that's a football game.
So I thought a lot about this one based on this past weekend, because obviously Friday night, flying high, Orlando just looks unstoppable. And then you watch KC. They do to Portland, you're just like, oh, okay, that's going to be tough to deal with. And I mentioned last week on the pod, I was like, all right, let's see how these defenses hold up. Obviously, Portland's kind of not up to the level. KC holds Portland to just the one goal. Sophia Smith from distance. That's going to happen. So it could be that KC defensively has got some stuff figured out. But I think even still, I really, really trust that Orlando team defensively to be able to kind of at least slow down that Kansas City attack. Sure. Just because when they do pack it in, they're very disciplined defensively. They are very synchronized defensively. They do a great job covering and rotating to make sure that they don't give up anything easy. Again, just the 11 goals, 2 straight shutouts for Orlando. And then I think offensively, this looks like a different team. Mm-hmm. It does look like, Seb Hines just said, hey, you 8 players that are not our 2 center backs, if you get the ball, go. Because I think Bonda is just dangerous enough where it's like, it doesn't matter whether it's Abello on the left or Martinez on the right. One could go, one can stay. And I think when you have Martinez, Sams and Strom and Morehouse in goal, you kind of roll the dice, kind of feel good about that. If what you're trading it for is Abello, like driving and then basically the entire midfield and those 3 attacking players up front, making themselves available, being creative, being unselfish, and just kind of manufacturing goals. But, with that said, Casey's just fucking terrifying, man. Like the Lo LaBonta 2-goal performance kind of reminded me, I don't think I've ever told you this story, but I played in a very competitive kind of adult basketball league in Brooklyn. We had one guy in our team who left our team because he got signed to play for a G League team.
Holy
so
shit.
He's like, all right, I got to go. So I was like, okay, he's good. Like a really, really good in his prime player. And I'm in my late 30s at this point. But I'll never forget, this is a very competitive league. I was not a good player. I was probably like a bench player, like a 6th or 7th man on this team, just kind of like a sort of a spot shooter. And I think I made 3 threes in the first half or something. And he was telling one of our other teammates, and I heard him because it was kind of within earshot. He's like, all right, well, if Dino's hitting today, they're in trouble, basically, because our team, these teams are really loaded. And I kind of felt the same about LaBonta. I'm like, all right, if LaBonta is going to be doing this, you already have to contend with Debinha and Bia and Chawinga and Cooper, who also is coming on. LaBonta, obviously a great player, but how many players can you throw extra attention to until just kind of your defense turns into Swiss cheese? So incredibly fired up about that upcoming matchup. I'm dying to hear what you expect to see when those 2 teams lock up.
I'm really interested to see how cagey they are at the beginning. Exactly what you're talking about of the Pride not being afraid to roll the dice. Maybe you come out at first and you're like, okay, let's hold off on that. And let's see if KC accidentally runs into one of our traps. Because we have a good enough defenders to kind of stop them. And now they're caught off guard and we can catch them on the break. I'd be very interested to see. I mean, obviously I'm excited to watch the entire match. First 20 minutes, I want to see that and then kind of isolate it and be like, okay, is this first 20 minutes significantly different than the next 70, or are you just walking in and saying this is the game plan, mash the gas pedal on this game plan for the entire match?
I love thinking about the game in terms of segments. This is something that I think you introduced to me, and I think the 2 15-minute segments that I've gotten the most attached to are the 15 before halftime and the 15 after halftime.
Hell yeah.
Well, actually, it's the 15 before halftime and then the 10 extra minutes that you get. So it ends up being 25 to 28 minutes that we have to get to watch. But that last 15 before halftime is really when it's let's see how sharp you really are. Because in the first 10, 15, 18 minutes, even Utah looked like they were going to stand up to the Pride. And I think that's kind of what Mike Watts was saying. He was like, all right, well, but now that they want to play like this is going to be interesting. But once you get to the back half of the first half, you really start to see, okay, can you hold your concentration when we get to 44, 49, 52, 54, before you get to halftime, you see Yasmin Ryan get the red card. Well, I mean, that's 54 minutes into the first half, right. So it's you really have to lock in for nearly an hour first half, nearly an hour in the second half, and then the first 15 minutes after halftime. Do you come out ready, or do you come out all right, well, let's work up a sweat and still 45 plus to kind of crawl back into this one? And I think that's when the good teams really just come out and smack you.
100%. I mean, you saw what KC did against Seattle a couple weeks ago. They were able to come out and score 2 goals in 90 seconds. They came out after halftime against the Thorns, and Chewinga got one in the 47th minute. So I think you're 100% right about that, where the best teams come out and they go, okay, that was 15 minutes to rest our legs. Start your engines. We're going to come out. We're going to run right at you again.
Totally. So, yeah, we're going to be locked into that one. You mentioned, I think you were on this on Twitter over the weekend. I wanted to kind of resurface it. The Chewinga minutes discussion. So you had some great stats on our MVP episode talking about how available Chewinga was. And obviously, she didn't start the first match. I think she just came on for 5 or 10 minutes or something.
I think so.
Something of the sort. Maybe it was a little bit more. I think maybe it was more like 25, 30. And had a goal involvement pretty much a minute. Right. We already knew what time it was. She steps onto the field and already is making stuff happen. But her minutes, obviously a 4-1 victory or a 4-1 lead on the road. Sophie Smith, to our earlier 15-minute segment discussion, they're already down 4-0. She gets a goal in the 70s. Not too much to be afraid of. It's not like you're going to fall behind 6-4 where you need Chewinga to come back and grab a couple back the other way. What was your take on having her in so deep into the match?
Yeah, friend of the show at @MortyMo_ on Twitter pointed out, like, how many minutes has Temwa Chewinga played? And I remembered I had the research like on hand from the MVP episode, so I chimed into our pal Morgan there to say at that point Chewinga had played 1,083 minutes. Now you add 90 to that because I think Chewinga didn't get taken off until the 90th minute of this match. Chewinga has played 1,173 minutes out of 14 matches played. 13 of those are starts.
Wow.
I gotta imagine that is good. She was there with 12 full 90s played. I think that's going to bring her to 13 full 90s played throughout the season. I have been accused, and I fully raise my hand to this. I think somebody on the YouTube comments once called me a sissy for being concerned about player injuries. That's fine. I'll wear that, I guess. Yeah, I think Vlatko should rest her a little more. She is a majestic athlete, one of the absolute, at worst, one of the best 5 athletes in the league. I think we could probably say that.
Yep.
Her ability to score and pass at pace is unparalleled. Motor never stops. We talked about the blocks. She plays the full field. That's great. And yes, I want that player on the field for as much as possible. I also don't want to be Tom Thibodeau to throw in another basketball reference.
Yep.
So yeah, 1,173 minutes played. I think when I mentioned that on the MVP pod, when I was doing the research, it was Chewinga. I think there were a couple other position players in the top 10, but it was like 6 goalkeepers who were leading in the minutes. And I was just like, okay, well, maybe this forward who gives you all kinds of sprints up and down the field, maybe a little more rest might be helpful.
A little different. Not playing the same game exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very fair point. It's interesting because you got the stretch run let me ask you this. Do you think that there is some variance with regards to some teams prioritizing the Shield, some teams prioritizing the playoffs and the Cup?
That is really, really interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about it in those terms. And I don't know, gut reaction is well, what manager would play like that? What manager has a team who would want to play like that? If you have a team full of Americans, do they look at it and say, we need to win the NWSL championship? That's more meaningful than the Shield. Or do you have a bunch of Americans who grew up watching European football and say, no, the best team is the team that wins the most matches throughout the regular season? So that's a really good question, man. I got to think there are some, right? There are just too many. There's such a diversity of opinions and experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned Portland, right? They're 9 points back. At some point, they're going to say, how about we figure out how to make sure that we're maximizing our talent pool going into the playoffs versus are we going to catch Kansas City? Are we going to catch Orlando? And then at some point, and then it just kind of trickles up the standings. And then at some point it's Gotham, and then perhaps it's Washington, or maybe, we do have a 3 or 4 team pile up at the top. But either way, I think there has to be kind of some variance. And then you have your teams your Louisvilles and your Carolinas, they must be firmly thinking playoffs at this point.
Got it.
Anything can happen. We saw what happened last year. So just something to keep an eye on. I'm going to be interested to see what a team like KC or kind of like what those 3, 4, 5, 6 teams on the standings, like kind of how they approach the back half of the season. And if we're able to see anything with regard to, all right, are they tipping their hand a little bit? So we'll keep an eye on that. One more match to cover. You were in the building.
Seattle Reign 1, Racing Louisville 1.